Why does being boring secretly make you powerful? We live in a world obsessed with spectacle. Everything is curated, exaggerated, filtered. Social media demands you be interesting constantly. You have to be loud, spontaneous, wild, unpredictable. You need to chase experiences, post photos of your food, visit exotic places, and turn every moment into content. The message is clear. If you're boring, you're invisible. If you're routine, you're irrelevant. And yet, if we pause the noise for just a moment, if we step back and examine what actually builds power, influence, longevity, and meaning, we begin to see something strange, something paradoxical. It's not the spectacular that builds strength. It's the boring. It's the quiet repetition and the unsexy discipline, the unshared, unposted, unseen acts done in solitude. Carl Jung discovered that the power we admire in others is often rooted in behaviors we'd simply scroll past online. The Swiss psychoanalyst unveiled a disturbing secret about the human psyche. Those who embrace the ordinary, the tedious, the seemingly bland, develop an irresistible magnetic force that operates in the shadows of collective consciousness. Think about the last time you walked into a room full of people. Your eyes immediately scanned for the loudest voices, the biggest gestures, the most animated conversations. But there was someone else there, wasn't there? Someone sitting quietly in the corner, barely speaking, yet somehow you found yourself stealing glances at them throughout the night. Jung called this phenomenon the power of the introverted presence. While everyone else was performing, competing for attention like actors on a stage, this person was simply existing. They weren't trying to be mysterious or aloof. They weren't playing games or using psychology tricks. They were just comfortable being themselves, unfiltered and unperformed. What happens in our brains when we encounter someone like this is fascinating. We're so used to people demanding our attention that when we meet someone who doesn't, it creates a vacuum. Our minds can't process it. We start wondering what they're thinking, what makes them tick, why they seem so at peace while everyone else is scrambling for validation. This isn't about being antisocial or rude. It's about having such a solid sense of yourself that you don't need external confirmation. When you stop broadcasting your thoughts, feelings, and reactions to the world, something magical happens. People start projecting onto you. They fill in the blanks with their own imagination, often creating a version of you that's far more interesting than anything you could have manufactured. The quiet person becomes the wise one. The reserved individual becomes the deep thinker. The one who doesn't speak much becomes the one whose words carry weight when they do choose to share them. It's a complete reversal of what our culture teaches us about gaining influence and respect. But here's where Jung's insight gets really interesting. This power doesn't come from strategy or manipulation. It emerges naturally when you stop trying so hard to be seen and heard. When you're not constantly performing, your authentic self has room to breathe and be noticed. People can sense authenticity from across a room, even if they can't articulate what they're feeling. The modern world has trained us to believe that silence equals weakness, that not having an opinion about everything makes you boring, that blending into the background means you're forgettable. But the opposite is true. In a world where everyone is shouting, the person who whispers commands attention. In a culture of constant oversharing, the person who keeps some mystery becomes infinitely more intriguing. When you're comfortable with silence, you give others permission to be comfortable with it too. You create space for real conversation instead of performative chatter. You allow moments to breathe instead of filling every second with noise. This creates a completely different energy around you, one that people find refreshing and magnetic without understanding why. The power of silent presence isn't about being passive or invisible. It's about being so secure in yourself that you don't need to prove anything to anyone. You're not hiding who you are, you're just not performing it. And in a world full of performances, authenticity stands out like a lighthouse in a storm. Now that you understand how powerful presence can be, let's explore something even more counterintuitive. The less interested you appear in impressing others, the more impressed they become with you. It sounds backwards, doesn't it? Yet this psychological principle governs more human interactions than we care to admit. Jung observed that our psyche operates on a principle of compensation. When someone desperately wants our approval, we unconsciously value it less. But when someone seems genuinely indifferent to our opinion, we suddenly find ourselves working harder to earn their respect. It's like our minds are wired to want what seems scarce or unavailable. This isn't about being cold or dismissive toward people. True disinterest comes from a place of inner fulfillment, not from arrogance or manipulation. When you're genuinely content with yourself, you stop needing others to validate your worth. You can appreciate people without needing them to appreciate you back. You can enjoy conversations without having to be the most interesting person in the room. Most people are walking around with an invisible sign that says, "Please like me, please approve of me, please think I'm smart and funny and worthy." They're constantly scanning faces for signs of approval, adjusting their behavior based on reactions, trying to say the right thing at the right time. It's exhausting for them and uncomfortable for everyone around them. When you operate from a place of genuine disinterest in others' opinions, you create a completely different dynamic. You're not playing the approval game anymore. You're not keeping score of who likes you or doesn't. You're not changing your personality to fit what you think others want to see. This freedom is incredibly attractive to people, even if they can't explain why. Think about how you feel around someone who clearly needs your validation versus someone who seems perfectly fine whether you like them or not. The needy person makes you feel pressured and uncomfortable. You can sense their desperation, and it makes you want to pull away. But the person who doesn't need anything from you, they feel safe. You can relax around them because there's no agenda, no expectation, no performance required. This magnetic force of disinterest works because it signals confidence and self-sufficiency. It suggests that this person has something valuable going on in their inner world that they don't need to share or prove to anyone. Mystery is always more compelling than an open book, and someone who doesn't reveal everything about themselves immediately becomes more intriguing by default. But here's the crucial part that many people miss when they try to fake this attitude. Genuine disinterest in approval doesn't mean you don't care about people or that you're emotionally unavailable. It means you care about connection and authenticity more than you care about being liked. You're interested in real relationships, not superficial validation. Here's where things become truly fascinating. The people who appear to effortlessly attract opportunities, relationships, and success aren't actually effortless at all. They're simply putting their effort into places most others overlook. While the majority exhaust themselves trying to impress the world, the truly powerful are quietly building something far more valuable: inner strength. Jung explained that the psyche works much like a river. When you try to force the water to move in a certain direction, it only creates resistance and turbulence. But when you align yourself with the natural current, you move with incredible force and grace. The same principle applies to success and influence. The more you chase them directly, the more they slip away. But the moment you stop chasing and start building, they begin to flow naturally toward you. Think about this carefully. Every person you've ever met who seems to have it all together, who attracts good things without apparent effort, who people naturally gravitate toward, shares one striking trait. They're not trying to prove anything. They're not endlessly selling themselves or their achievements. They're not broadcasting every success on social media or dropping names in casual conversations. Instead, they devote their energy elsewhere. They're committed to their craft, to growth, to inner development. They show up consistently, day after day, doing the work that matters whether anyone is watching or not. They read, they practice, they refine their skills, they build habits, they strengthen their character, and they deepen their understanding of both themselves and the world around them. This steady commitment creates what Jung described as psychological gravity. Just as objects with greater mass naturally pull smaller ones toward them, people with inner substance attract opportunities, relationships, and resources without having to chase them. They don't need to reach out and grab. Things simply orbit closer, drawn to the quiet force they've cultivated. And here's the beautiful irony. The less you try to impress others, the more impressive you become. When you stop performing success and begin actually living it, people notice. When you stop talking endlessly about goals and instead start quietly achieving them, your results echo louder than any words could. When you stop seeking validation and start validating yourself through consistent action, others begin to see you as someone genuinely worthy of respect and attention. Of course, this transformation doesn't happen overnight. It demands patience and trust in a process that runs completely against the instant gratification culture we live in. It means choosing the so-called boring work of self-development over the exciting performance of self-promotion. It means building a foundation instead of decorating a facade. It means becoming a person worth knowing rather than merely trying to be known. Jung's vision of true transformation emerges when we do the inner work of integrating all parts of ourselves, both the ones we admire and the ones we'd rather deny. And the fascinating thing is that this kind of deep work doesn't require hours of therapy or endless rituals. Even dedicating just a few minutes a day to structured reflection and shadow integration can create an authentic magnetism that draws success naturally. That's exactly why tools like the SIM Method ebook exist, to give you a simple, practical way to unlock this inner power in 5 minutes a day. If you want to explore it further, you'll find the link waiting in the first pinned comment below. And this is what makes the whole approach so powerful. When success does arrive, and it will, it's sustainable. It isn't built on passing trends, clever tricks, or lucky breaks. It's built on competence, character, and authenticity. People can feel this immediately. They can tell whether someone's success is real or merely well-marketed, whether someone's confidence comes from genuine accomplishment or from surface-level branding. The person who refuses to play the conventional game of chasing approval often ends up winning in ways that matter far more. They gain respect that endures. They build relationships that last. They attract opportunities that align with their values. They cultivate a sense of fulfillment that doesn't depend on external applause. And most importantly, they win the greatest prize of all, genuine self-respect and inner peace. Building on this foundation of inner focus, let's explore one of Jung's most counterintuitive insights about human psychology. The moment you stop trying to impress people is the moment you actually become impressive. It's like trying to fall asleep. The harder you try, the more elusive it becomes. But when you stop trying and just relax into the process, it happens naturally. Most people spend enormous amounts of mental and emotional energy crafting an image of themselves for public consumption. They carefully choose their words to sound smart, select their clothes to look successful, share their achievements to appear accomplished, and filter their photos to seem attractive. They're essentially running a full-time marketing campaign for themselves, and it's exhausting everyone involved. But what happens when someone opts out of this game entirely? When they show up as themselves, without trying to manage anyone's perception or control any outcomes? Something remarkable occurs. They become a breath of fresh air in a world choking on performance and pretense. People don't know what to do with someone who isn't trying to sell them anything, including a version of themselves. This creates what psychologists call the authenticity advantage. In a sea of carefully curated personas, genuine authenticity stands out like a lighthouse. It's not that these people are necessarily more talented or accomplished than anyone else. It's that they're real in a world full of manufactured personalities. And realness is magnetic in ways that performance never can be. When you stop trying to impress, you also stop being afraid of disappointing. This freedom changes everything about how you interact with the world. You can have honest conversations instead of strategic ones. You can share genuine thoughts instead of calculated responses. You can make real connections instead of networking contacts. You can be helpful instead of just appearing helpful. This shift from impression management to authentic expression has profound effects on your nervous system too. When you're constantly performing, your body is in a state of mild stress. You're always monitoring reactions, adjusting behavior, managing anxiety about how you're being perceived. But when you let go of that need to control others' opinions, your entire system relaxes. You become more present, more grounded, more genuinely confident. People sense this relaxed energy immediately, even if they can't consciously identify what they're feeling. They know that being around you feels different, easier, more comfortable. They don't have to perform for you because you're not performing for them. This mutual authenticity creates the kind of deep connections that most people crave but rarely experience. The secret power of not trying to impress is that it makes you genuinely impressive. Not in the flashy, attention-grabbing way that our culture celebrates, but in the deep, lasting way that actually matters. You become someone people trust, someone they turn to for real advice, someone they want to spend time with, not because you're entertaining, but because you're real. This realness also makes you more effective in every area of life. When you're not wasting energy on managing perceptions, you can focus that energy on actual results. When you're not worried about looking smart, you can focus on actually becoming smarter. When you're not trying to appear successful, you can put all your effort into building genuine success. Now, we're getting to the heart of Jung's most radical discovery about human psychology. What most people see as their greatest weakness, their tendency toward routine and predictability, is actually their most powerful tool for influence and control, but not in the way you might think. When someone is genuinely comfortable with boredom, with the quiet spaces between excitement, with the ordinary moments that make up most of life, they develop something that drives other people absolutely crazy: contentment. And contentment, it turns out, is like kryptonite to a world addicted to stimulation. Think about how you feel around someone who genuinely doesn't need to be entertained. Someone who can sit in silence without reaching for their phone. Someone who doesn't fill every pause in conversation with nervous chatter. Someone who seems perfectly fine doing nothing at all. If you're honest, it probably makes you uncomfortable. You might even feel compelled to entertain them, to break the silence, to create some kind of stimulation. This is exactly what Jung meant when he talked about the power dynamics hidden in everyday interactions. The person who is comfortable with boredom holds all the cards because they're not playing the same game everyone else is playing. While others are desperately seeking stimulation, validation, excitement, and novelty, the boring person is operating from a place of inner fullness. But here's where it gets really interesting. This comfort with boredom isn't about being lazy or unmotivated. It's about being so secure in your own inner world that you don't need external stimulation to feel alive. You can find fascination in simple things. You can be entertained by your own thoughts. You can enjoy the process of just existing without needing constant input from the outside world. This creates what Jung called psychological independence. When you don't need to be entertained, you can't be controlled through entertainment. When you don't need constant stimulation, you can't be manipulated through excitement. When you're comfortable with ordinary moments, you can't be bought with promises of extraordinary experiences. Other people sense this independence immediately, even if they can't put their finger on what they're feeling. They know that you're not desperate for their attention or approval. They know that you have something they don't have, the ability to be genuinely satisfied with simple things. And this makes them want to understand you, to figure out your secret, to somehow capture some of that contentment for themselves. The weapon of boredom works because it exposes everyone else's addiction to stimulation. When you're the only person in a group who doesn't need to be constantly entertained, you become the most interesting person there by default. Not because you're doing anything exciting, but because you're demonstrating a kind of inner strength that most people have never developed. This doesn't mean you become a passive or unengaging person. Quite the opposite. When you're not desperate for stimulation, you can be more present in conversations. You can listen better because you're not constantly thinking about what you want to say next. You can enjoy simple pleasures more fully because you're not always looking for the next high. People start coming to you for advice, not because you're always talking, but because when you do speak, it comes from a place of genuine reflection rather than reactive emotion. They seek out your company, not because you're entertaining, but because being around you feels peaceful and grounding in a world that never stops spinning. The lethal part of this weapon is that it completely disarms the usual social games. You can't manipulate someone who doesn't need anything from you. You can't control someone who's perfectly content with or without your approval. You can't pressure someone who's genuinely comfortable with silence and stillness. This brings us to Jung's final and perhaps most profound insight about the nature of personal power. The magic isn't in being extraordinary at all. It's in being so completely, authentically ordinary that you become extraordinary by contrast. We live in a culture that worships the exceptional. Everyone is trying to be unique, special, different, remarkable. Social media has turned life into a constant audition where everyone is competing to be the most interesting person in the room. But what happens when someone opts out of this competition entirely? When someone embraces being completely, unapologetically ordinary? Something beautiful and strange occurs. They become magnetic in a way that no amount of extraordinariness can achieve. Because in a world full of people trying desperately to stand out, the person who's comfortable blending in actually stands out the most. Jung noticed this pattern in his patients over and over again. The ones who tried hardest to be special often felt the most empty and disconnected. But the ones who accepted their ordinariness, who found peace in being just another person, living just another life, these were the ones who seemed to have discovered something profound about the nature of happiness and fulfillment. This ordinariness isn't about being mediocre or settling for less. It's about recognizing that your worth doesn't depend on being better than anyone else. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room, the funniest person at the party, the most successful person in your field. You can just be yourself, with all your average qualities and normal limitations, and that's enough. When you stop trying to prove that you're special, you free up enormous amounts of mental and emotional energy. Energy that was previously spent on comparison, competition, and self-promotion can now be directed toward actually living your life. You can focus on what genuinely interests you, rather than what you think will impress others. You can pursue goals that align with your values, rather than goals that look good on social media. This shift toward embracing ordinariness has a profound effect on your relationships too. When you're not trying to be the most interesting person someone has ever met, you can actually get to know them instead of performing for them. When you're not competing with everyone, you can genuinely celebrate their successes. When you're comfortable being ordinary, you give others permission to be ordinary too. The hidden magic in this approach is that it makes you genuinely extraordinary, just not in the way our culture typically defines that word. You become extraordinarily peaceful, extraordinarily content, extraordinarily present. You develop the extraordinary ability to be happy with simple things, to find joy in mundane moments, to feel fulfilled without needing external validation. People are drawn to this energy like moths to a flame, not because you're putting on a show, but because you're demonstrating something they've forgotten is possible, the ability to be genuinely satisfied with an ordinary life. In a world where everyone is chasing the extraordinary and finding only exhaustion, you've discovered the secret that Jung knew all along. The most powerful people aren't those who need to prove their power. They're those who are so comfortable with who they are that power naturally flows to them. The most interesting people aren't those who try to be interesting. They're those who are so genuinely engaged with life that others can't help but be fascinated by their contentment. The magic of being completely ordinary is that it reveals extraordinariness for what it really is. Not a performance for others, but a natural expression of someone who has made peace with themselves exactly as they are. Here's something Jung discovered that will completely change how you think about influence and leadership. The people who have the most impact on others are often the ones you barely notice at first. They're not the loudest voices in the meeting, not the most charismatic speakers at the conference, not the ones dominating every conversation. They're the quiet ones who seem almost invisible until you realize that somehow everyone is looking to them for guidance. This invisible influence works because it operates below the radar of our conscious awareness. When someone is obviously trying to influence you, your psychological defenses immediately go up. You start questioning their motives, analyzing their words, resisting their suggestions. But when someone influences you so subtly that you don't even realize it's happening, there's no resistance because there's nothing obvious to resist. Jung called this the principle of indirect action. The most powerful forces in nature work this way. Gravity doesn't announce itself, it just pulls everything toward it. Water doesn't fight the rock, it simply flows around it until the rock eventually changes shape. The boring person operates with this same kind of natural, effortless influence. Think about the last time you changed your mind about something important. Chances are, it wasn't because someone gave you a brilliant argument or a persuasive presentation. It was probably because of a quiet conversation with someone who wasn't trying to change your mind at all. They just shared their perspective calmly, without agenda, and something about their certainty and peace made you reconsider your position. This is the power of influence without intention. When you're genuinely comfortable with people disagreeing with you, when you don't need to convince anyone of anything, when you can share your thoughts without attachment to outcomes, you create space for others to actually hear you. Your lack of pushiness becomes the very thing that makes people want to move in your direction. The invisible influencer doesn't collect followers, they attract genuine admirers. They don't build an audience, they build relationships. They don't seek power over others, they develop power within themselves that others naturally want to be around. Their influence isn't based on personality or charisma, it's based on substance and authenticity. But here's what makes this type of influence so sustainable and ethical. Because it's not manipulative or strategic, it doesn't create resentment or backlash. People don't feel like they've been sold something or talked into something against their better judgment. Instead, they feel like they've discovered something valuable through their own process of reflection and consideration. The boring person influences others by being so genuinely themselves that it gives everyone else permission to drop their masks and be genuine too. In a room full of people performing their best selves, the person who's just being their actual self becomes a beacon of authenticity that others gravitate toward without understanding why. This invisible influence extends into every area of life. At work, the boring person might not be the obvious leader, but they're often the one people seek out for advice and guidance. In relationships, they might not be the most exciting partner, but they're the one who creates a sense of safety and trust that allows real intimacy to develop. In social situations, they might not be the life of the party, but they're the one who makes everyone else feel more comfortable and accepted. The paradox is that by not trying to be influential, they become the most influential person in the room. By not seeking attention, they become the center of attention in the most authentic way possible. By not trying to lead, they naturally become the person everyone wants to follow. Jung understood that this type of influence is actually closer to how change really happens in the world. It's not the dramatic speeches or grand gestures that transform society. It's the quiet, consistent example of individuals who have found a better way to live. Their very existence becomes an argument for a different approach to life, one that others can't ignore because it so obviously works. The invisible influencer changes the world not by telling people what to do, but by showing them what's possible when you stop trying to impress everyone and start focusing on becoming genuinely content with who you are. So here we are at the end of this exploration into Jung's most counterintuitive insight about human nature. If you've made it this far, you're probably starting to see the world a little differently. Maybe you're noticing how exhausting it feels to constantly perform for others, how draining it is to always be on, how empty the pursuit of external validation really is. And maybe, just maybe, you're beginning to glimpse the profound freedom that comes from embracing the very thing our culture teaches us to fear: being ordinary, being quiet, being genuinely, authentically boring. The truth Jung discovered isn't just about psychology or influence or social dynamics. It's about the fundamental choice we all face every single day. Will you spend your precious energy trying to convince the world that you're worth paying attention to, or will you invest that energy in becoming someone actually worth knowing? Will you exhaust yourself chasing approval from people who don't really matter, or will you develop the kind of inner strength that naturally attracts the right people into your life? The boring person has already made this choice. They've chosen substance over spectacle, depth over drama, authenticity over approval. And in making that choice, they've discovered something the rest of the world is desperately searching for: genuine power that doesn't depend on anyone else's permission, influence that doesn't require manipulation, and a sense of self that can't be shaken by external circumstances. This is the secret Jung knew, and that every truly powerful person throughout history has understood. Real strength whispers, while weakness screams. True confidence needs no audience, and the most magnetic people are those who have learned to be completely satisfied with who they are when nobody else is watching.